using technology to promote self-regulated learning. As we noted earlier, teaching students to become proficient self-regulated learners will require thousands of hours of instruction spread over many years. With the many instructional responsibilities teachers have, you stand a better chance of contributing to this goal if you can use technology to supplement and reinforce your efforts. The studies we summarize in this section suggest that with certain qualifications, this is a real possibility. Modeling. Modeling, as we saw earlier in this chapter, is an effective way to help students acquire important SRL skills. It can also strengthen students' self-efficacy for computer-based learning. But what if a teacher does not have sufficient time to perform this function, or cannot always supply the modeling just when students need it? Might not a computer-based video model serve as an effective substitute? This was the driving question behind a study conducted with 6th grade students. The students, divided into 3 groups, worked on a computer-based hypermedia problem-solving simulation over the course of 15 45-minute class periods. Called Alien Rescue, the simulation had students play the role of scientists on an international space station whose mission was to rescue alien life forms. They encountered a ship that contained 6 species of aliens, survivors of a distant solar system that was destroyed by the explosion of a nearby star. The life support system of the alien ship had been damaged, and its members were in suspended animation. The students' task was to figure out which planets or moons of our solar system might serve as suitable homes for each of the alien species by using existing databases and a simulation within the program that let them design and launch probes. They recorded their notes and solutions in an online notebook. The students were assigned to one of 3 conditions. In the modeling condition, students watched video segments of an expert scientist solving the same problem for one of the alien species. At 4 points in the program, the model explained what he was trying to accomplish and how he used various tools, such as the online notebook and the probe design room. He also modeled such cognitive processes as self-questioning, making connections, identifying missing information, forming hypotheses, and taking notes in a list format. In the direct instruction condition, students received the same information but without modeling. The scientist explained the function of various tools and provided tips about how to work effectively. For example, if I were building a probe, I would use my mission statement to help me decide what to include on my probe. In the help condition, the scientist explained the function of various tools but provided no advice or modeling on how to use them. Although the students in each group worked at their own computers, they were encouraged to share information with classmates and ask one another for help. The students in the modeling condition significantly outscored those in the direct instruction and help conditions on several measures. They were more apt to take notes in list format, to separate their notes into sections by topic, and to consult their notes. They designed fewer probes, but this was expected because they spent more time thinking about and designing probes that were consistent with their mission statements. The modeling group also attained significantly higher scores than the other 2 groups for the quality of their problem solutions. Subsequent research has shown that watching a computer-based model, even an animated one, produces better learning and transfer of problem-solving skills than if no model is available. Providing cognitive and metacognitive feedback. As you undoubtedly know from your own experience, although we do mention it in later chapters, efficient and effective learning of new skills requires timely feedback. Because teachers may not always be in a position to offer feedback precisely when it is needed, computer programs have been created to fill this need. One such program, Summary Street, was designed to help students improve their ability to summarize text by giving them many opportunities to summarize different types of text, by providing feedback, and by having them revise their summaries with more feedback as often as necessary until they meet the standards built into the program. 8th grade students who worked with Summary Street for 4 weeks showed greater improvement both in the amount of relevant information contained in their summaries and in the quality of their summaries than did a comparable group of students who summarized the same passages but did not receive feedback. Furthermore, low and medium performing students made the largest improvements. As we noted earlier in the chapter, self-regulated learners monitor their thinking as they work through a task to ensure a high level of learning. Teachers and parents often help students develop and strengthen this skill by reminding them to think about key operations, such as appropriately defining the problem or issue at hand and recalling relevant prior knowledge. This type of support is often referred to as metacognitive feedback. The type of feedback students more commonly receive, called results feedback, takes the form of such cautionary and positive statements as try again, check once more, and very good, wonderful job. One study compared computer-provided instruction and metacognitive feedback with computer-provided instruction and results feedback on 11th graders' mathematical problem solving. As students in the metacognitive feedback group worked through the problem, the computer would prompt them to think about the nature of the problem, the relevance of prior knowledge, and the use of appropriate problem-solving techniques by posing such questions as, what is the problem all about? What are the similarities and differences between the problem at hand and problems you have solved in the past? And what tactics or principles are appropriate for solving this problem, and why? Students in the results feedback group received comments such as, think about it, you made a mistake, try again, check it once more, very good, and wonderful job. On a 27-item test that required students to explain their reasoning behind their solutions to each problem, students who received metacognitive feedback significantly outscored students who received results feedback. The explanations of the metacognitive feedback group were of a significantly higher quality. They included both algebraic formulas and verbal arguments than the explanations of the results feedback group. As we pointed out in Chapter 7, research consistently shows feedback, particularly of the metacognitive type, to be a powerful influence on learning. Providing scaffolded instruction. Earlier in the book, we described Vygotsky's theory of cognitive development and his recommendation that teachers use various instructional aids called scaffolds to help students acquire the knowledge and self-regulatory skills that they would probably not otherwise acquire. But as busy as most classrooms are, it is not always possible for teachers to maximize the use of scaffolded instruction. Many advocates of computer-based instruction believe that computer programs that have various types of scaffolds built into them can accomplish what some teachers cannot. A study designed to assess that belief examined the extent to which 11th grade students used the features of a hypermedia database called Decision Point that contained both information about the civil rights movement in the United States during the 1960s and several types of scaffolds designed to encourage students to make optimal use of the database. Each student was assigned a 4-person group. The students in each group were told to assume that they were civil rights leaders in 1968, shortly after the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. They were asked to develop a solution to the following problem. What strategy should be used to continue pursuing the goal of the civil rights movement? Using the Decision Point database, each group was assigned to gather relevant information on particular aspects of the civil rights movement. In other words, or for example, the legal system, desegregation, voting rights, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, and the rejection of integration. The Decision Point database contained 4 types of scaffolds. The first was a set of interactive essays. Each essay provided an overview of a historical event, such as the March on Washington to secure voting rights for all blacks, with hyperlinks to related documents within the database. If you have seen online encyclopedias in which certain names, places, events, and concepts of an essay are highlighted and linked to related documents, you can visualize how these interactive essays worked. The second scaffold was a set of recommended documents for each event. The program suggested that students first examine 8 to 10 recommended documents for an event before exploring any other information sources. The third scaffold was a student guide that provided categories that might be used by a professional historian to organize and synthesize information about an event, such as groups involved in the event, goals of each group, and strategies used by each group. The final scaffold was a journal in which students could note the effectiveness of their daily information gathering strategies, the problems they had encountered, and the progress they had made toward completing the task. The purpose of the journal was to help students monitor their efforts. Of the 4 scaffolds designed into the database, the interactive essays were used the most. Each group examined at least one of the essays, and 2 of the 4 groups read the essays for each event they were assigned. A third group examined all but one of the essays. The hyperlinks, however, were used much less frequently. Only 39% of the total number of documents available were accessed. Although students ignored most of the available documents, the ones they did examine were usually those recommended by the program. Consequently, this was felt to be a somewhat effective scaffold. Only 2 groups used the student guide scaffold to summarize their analyses for each event they were assigned to research. Moreover, the students' responses to this scaffold were judged to be inadequate. Most contained just a single phrase or sentence for each category. The student journals were used least of all. No group completed a journal for each day of data collection, and the entries were brief and superficial. The results of this study provide limited support for embedding self-regulatory scaffolds in computerized databases. Students are most likely to use those scaffolds that they perceive to be most relevant to the successful completion of a task, and ignore those that appear less relevant or require more time to complete than they have available. As the next set of studies indicates, it is also possible that students decline to use most of the scaffolds in the Decision Point program because they lacked other self-regulatory qualities such as persistence and self-efficacy. The effect of self-regulated learning skills on computer-based instruction. From the earliest days of computer-based instruction, the designers of instructional programs have disagreed over the issue of how much control to give students. Some programs offer students no choices. The program provides the same material to all students in the same sequence, under the same conditions, and at the same rate. Other programs allow students to choose which material they will examine, for how long, and in what sequence. Although the learner control option has been strongly promoted by many designers because of its potential to increase student interest, motivation, and achievement, research findings have been inconclusive. An analysis of studies that have examined learner control in hypermedia programs concluded that the complexity of such programs and the freedom to choose how to investigate the program's many facets overwhelm many students and negate the program's potential benefits. Students may, for example, become disoriented. If you have ever clicked on several levels of links starting from the home page of a website, and then realized that you couldn't recall how you got to the page you were viewing or how to get back to where you started, you can appreciate how easy it is to become disoriented in hyperspace. Another problem is distraction. Hypermedia programs and websites have so much information embedded in them that it is easy to forget what your main goal is and to become distracted investigating those related but somewhat beside the point links. For students to be able to avoid these potential problems and experience the benefits that hypermedia programs can offer, you will have to take steps to ensure that they have a reasonable amount of prior knowledge about the subject being studied, are interested in the subject, and have well-developed SRL skills. The suggestions for teaching that we offered earlier in this chapter, as well as those in Chapter 11, Motivation, should help you formulate some concrete ideas about how to accomplish these goals. The effect of self-efficacy on online instruction. The use of the World Wide Web as an information gathering and problem-solving resource is becoming increasingly popular in schools, but social cognitive theory suggests that successful use of the web for this purpose will require high levels of self-regulation. Recent research on university students engaged in cyber learning suggests that self-regulated learning ability is related directly or indirectly to the flow of learning, to satisfaction with learning experiences, and to persistence. Learning interactively online will also require self-efficacy. Because self-efficacy is task-specific, the following types of self-efficacy will play a role in web-based instruction, WBI. Self-efficacy for learning the subject matter, self-efficacy for using the web, and because WBI requires learners to locate and analyze information with little or no teacher guidance, self-efficacy for self-regulated learning. The effect of these forms of self-efficacy on achievement and web use was investigated among high school sophomores in Korea. Before the study began, students were given measures of self-efficacy for SRL, academic self-efficacy, internet self-efficacy, and cognitive strategy use. The students were then given worksheets for 3 topics: common diseases of the organs in our bodies, smoking and health, drugs and prevention, that contained questions to be answered and blank tables to be completed. Each worksheet listed the addresses of websites that were likely to contain useful information. The students were responsible for locating whatever information the site contained that would help them fill out the worksheet. In addition, they could use commercial search engines to identify other sites that contained relevant information. Following the 3rd session, students took 2 tests, a written exam of multiple choice and short answer questions that covered the 3 topics, and a performance test in which students had to access 2 websites and locate information pertaining to given questions. Several gender differences were found that are consistent with the research findings we described in Chapter 4, Understanding Student Differences. Female students scored significantly higher than male students on the self-efficacy for SRL and cognitive strategy use measures. The fact that the females also significantly outscored the males on the written exam suggests that higher levels of self-efficacy for SRL and greater use of SRL skills account for the finding that females typically earn higher grades than males. Consistent with research findings reported earlier in this chapter, self-efficacy for SRL was highly correlated with academic self-efficacy and strategy use. Finally, previous experience with computers and self-efficacy for SRL were both related significantly to self-efficacy for internet use, which in turn was related significantly to performance on the web search test. Conclusions about computer technology and self-regulated learning. The studies we have summarized and many others indicate that computer-based instructional programs can play a productive role in the development and support of students' SRL skills. They can provide students with concrete examples of self-regulation skills and explanations of how those skills relate to achieving a goal. They can support and strengthen the skill of self-monitoring by reminding students at critical points to think about the nature of the problem being solved, similar problems encountered in the past, and appropriate problem-solving tactics. They can also provide a variety of scaffolds. In short, technology can do for SRL many of the things that teachers do, giving teachers more time to work individually with students who need additional help. But, and to repeat a point we made earlier in the book, the use of technology to promote SRL has its limits. Without teacher guidance and oversight, some students will profit from such open-ended tools as simulations, databases, the internet, and the various social networking tools that are part of what is called Web 2, whereas others will feel likely overwhelmed and confused. If you use these tools to promote SRL and other goals, one of the first things you will need to do is determine students' current levels of SRL ability and self-efficacy. Challenging assumptions. Taking learning personally. Celeste says, I've been thinking about how to teach students to be better learners. I guess I'd always thought that school was where students encountered stuff to learn, and that by encountering stuff, they just naturally learned how to learn. I'm thinking differently now. Antonio says, so am I. I think of myself as a model for learning rather than just the content provider, and it is making a difference. One of the things I've noticed recently is that my students become very interested when I show some of my own difficulties as a learner and show them how I have coped with those difficulties. I've also tried to bring in other models to show students that learning a new skill is not easy. We were working on writing, and our team brought in a local writer who really inspired the kids. Instead of just reading a published piece, she passed out 6 different drafts and showed the kids the problems with each one. She described how she solved the problems, including all the false starts she made and all of the efforts she threw away. She talked about how hard it was to write, but how rewarding it was to solve each problem and work through to an end product. She was terrific, and since then the kids are taking more responsibility for revising and editing their own work. We have workshop days now, and they are great. Kids are talking to each other about what they are trying to write, talking to me and to the other teachers in the team. It's really a lot of fun. Learning is fun, says Connie. Learning to become more capable, learning to persist when something is difficult, learning that problems are opportunities to gain skill and confidence, learning to take responsibility for yourself. Don says to Connie, "You're right, Doc." He leans back from the table. Learning to help students become better learners makes me feel a lot more confident about becoming a teacher. And you know what? That's the kind of learning that really is fun, and I want my students to feel exactly the same way. And I'm not reading that sarcastically at all.